Before we begin, since this is a BBC-owned property, I feel the need to point out that the news arm of the BBC has a continuing issue with transphobic leanings in its news coverage. You can find in a pinned comment below various videos from both myself and other YouTubers covering this issue. And while I understand that the Doctor Who creative team is not responsible for this, I will continue to point this out for as long as it remains a consistent issue. Thank you.
Daleks do not have managers!
Eve of the Daleks. Well, Flux really needed a palate cleanser, and this'll do nicely. I was a little nervous to go back to that because I remember really liking it. I remember thinking this is definitely one of Chibnall's better stories, and some of the stuff that I've rewatched has not held up as well as I would like, and I've realized some of it I was grading on a curve more than I realized. But this is still good. Is it like absolute top tier Doctor Who? No, it's not. But, it's fun. It's inventive. It's got a neat central conceit. I just have a good time with this. Sometimes an episode of Doctor Who is like, well, that's just fun. And in the reality, you mean that's kind of silly, but it just kind of tickles me. Like, if we're going to give Chibnall some credit, I kind of have a soft spot for Dinosaurs on a Spaceship. It's just fun. It's not especially good, but it's fun. This is fun, but also, like, it's not only fun. Yes, it is absolutely fun. But it's also got some cleverness to it. It's got some good performances in it. It's got some great moments in it. And the core idea, just the nature of the time loop, is well done. Doctor Who has not done time loops nearly as often as you would think, given that time travel is so central to the show. But here we go. I mean, there have been a couple here and there, depending on how you want to define a time loop. Heaven Sent would be the one most recent to this, and this doesn't even come close to that. But if that was using a time loop to be introspective and philosophical, this is using a time loop to just have fun. I'm going to end up saying fun an awful lot. Hope you didn't make a drinking game out of it, because it's just a good word for this. I like just the closed in space. Like, we're not dealing with a large amount of space. They're stuck in just this building, and it's not that interesting a building, but we're stuck here. We have limited resources, and we have Daleks to deal with. Additionally, with the time loop, I actually rather like the notion that every time the loop happens, it gets a minute shorter. That, I've never encountered that anywhere else, but I actually really love that idea, because that is a great way to bring in some pressure and counteract the one major deflating aspect that a time loop can potentially have. Because you can use time loops to do any number of things, but there's something that kind of inherently takes the stakes out of it, which is that once characters realize they're in a time loop, they basically have an infinite number of tries to get out of it, figure out what's going on, whatever. But to have characters who become aware of the time loop relatively early, but also it's shorter every time, that's a neat way to still play around with a time loop, but also be like, yeah, you don't get to just bang away at this infinitely until something works. You better get off your butt and figure this out. I like that. That's a really fun combination of elements, and it works quite well. I enjoy the Daleks in this. Yes, I know everyone makes fun of the character of Nick just ducking and two Daleks shoot themselves. I know everyone makes fun of that, and I'm not going to say it isn't a little dumb, but I think with the tone and the feel of this, it just fits well. And between the Daleks using far more rapid fire than they normally do, with the sort of Gatling style gun, and us not having, at least to my memory, having ever seen somebody do this before. Like, don't ever do it again. Don't try and make me believe the Daleks ever fall for it again. But under the specific circumstances, yeah, I'll buy it this time. And I also kind of like that the show hangs a lampshade on it. Lampshade hanging can be a double-edged sword. This acknowledgement of, yeah, the thing we did is kind of ridiculous. Like, if you overdo it, you just sound smug. You just come across, or even potentially lazy. Like, yeah, we knew that was a problem, but we aren't going to fix it. But this does lampshade hanging well, I think.
It was a lot of strategic analysis, weapons assessment, and battle-ready thinking.
Did you duck?
Yeah.
Nice.
That was just the right way to handle that situation, as far as I am concerned. I like that. Speaking of the Daleks with the Gatling guns, like, it's just fun. Again, really sorry if you made a drinking game out of that, my use of that word. But I also can't see it without thinking of this from, I believe the channel is Joe Lever. I'll leave a link, but here's a clip.
And this time we have exchanged the pew-pew for a rat-a-tat-tat, and it cannot possibly miss.
I can't not think about that, and that didn't even like make it like, oh, I can't take this seriously anymore, because this episode isn't asking to be taken super seriously. It actually kind of makes it more fun, and honestly it kind of fits with moments like when Dan just decides to mess with the Dalek to stall it for a bit, and he's treating it like it's an automated function of this storage space. He's like, I'm gonna report you to your manager. I think the whole rat-a-tat-tat thing fits with that feel. But again, that's also just a great moment for Dan. It's nice. It's one of the fun things about a time loop when a character becomes self-aware and has that moment of realization of, oh, okay, so I can do something really stupid and get a free pass on it. Because as a way to distract the Daleks, like, that's real dumb, but it'll work because you don't have to survive the distraction you're doing. So yeah, sure, have fun with it. And I like that he just like gets in close and just circles around with it so he can't quite get his gun in on it. That's just the tone of this thing. It's just the feel of this, and I think it's great. There's some bits that are not as well handled. So I mentioned Nick already. So Nick is not as bad as I remember him being. Oh, actually, let me back up. Nick is not bad as a performance. The performance is fine. He's charming. He's lovely. I like him as a presence. The issue is the sort of specifics of the characterization. First of all, let's go with neurodivergent coded in terms of his behavior. And it really does, it rides right on the line between sort of depicting a sympathetic view of this slightly off behavior. Like, I think the moment that encapsulates that best is when Nick says,
See you next year?
Have you been practicing that?
Yes.
like, that's a moment where it's like, oh, he's trying. And honestly, even the reason for saving the stuff like the Monopoly board in his storage unit, I kind of get that. It's like, it's not mine. I don't feel right throwing it out, but I don't want to look at it. I'll keep it here in case this girl I dated or this person I went out with one time ever wants it back. And as acknowledged by the end, like, they're never going to come and get it. But, like, that's a thought process that I understand. But then we get the thing where he's been coming specifically on New Year's because he's certain that she'll be here, and he's been doing it for at least the last 3 years. And that's sort of pushing it a little bit. I'm not going to say that's completely out of the realm of possibility in terms of certain behaviors for certain types of neurodivergency, but I am going to say, like, it's being played for creepy factor there. Or at least it comes across that way. I think maybe they thought it was endearing. They also have the woman, like, berate him at one point, like, calling him names and, like, kind of shouting at him. And I am, thankfully, like, she does get called out on that. And it's a heightened moment. She's angry. But, like, even just that scene felt really uncomfortable.
Man, you are weird.
What?
Bit harsh.
Bit hard.
That's the thing. I'm not sure this crosses over into flat out depicting neurodivergent behaviors as creepy, but it comes uncomfortably close. It goes from me feeling like, oh, they like this is empathetic and this is kind of nice, to being like, I don't know about this. And I don't feel comfortable saying it definitively does cross the line, but boy, does it come close. It comes uncomfortably close to it. So that's not great. There's also the stuff with Yaz and the Doctor. And here's the thing. The scene between Dan and Yaz is actually a pretty nice scene.
Is it that obvious?
Well, maybe not to a good-hearted weirdo. I spent 4 years traveling the world with you. I saw it then.
I don't know why it's where they put it. In an episode that is otherwise actually quite well paced, like, we're in a situation where things are not quite going to plan and you're at a point where you need things to go to plan and you're going to stop and have this conversation now. Like, I'm not saying that I don't believe the characters would do it. I'm just saying for the narrative flow. I don't know about that. The Doctor gets a couple of good moments. I really like her little speech.
Something seems impossible. We try. It doesn't work. We try again. We learn. We improve. We fail again. But better.
I just like that. And I also actually kind of really love that in the loop immediately after she gives the rousing speech, they get taken out almost immediately. It's like it's making the point like, yeah, that is what you're going to have to do. Just because you had a rousing speech last loop doesn't mean you're suddenly on top of this. And you just get wiped out like real early on. And that one, like, that's what I mean when I say that this episode is actually quite well structured and well paced, except for, that conversation between Dan and Yaz, which is, again, a decent conversation. Just like, why there? But these things are minor, ultimately. I don't super love or need to see either of the two guest characters again, but they work for this story. They both bring an energy that is different from the two companions or the Doctor, so they do bring a contribution, and neither of them is so one-dimensional that I can't stand them, which has been an issue with some of Chibnall's writing. That's not the case here. And overall, again, the way that is laid out, the pace that it takes, the tone that it takes, it feels like, okay, we just went through a lot. Let's just kick back, be a little silly, but have a lot of fun. And even things like the escalation of, what's his name, Jeff, the guy who's not even there, who's using all these empty storage units in ways that he's not supposed to be using them. And we just sort of find out more and more and more and more, including the implication that maybe he lives there. Though that one's a little bit of an odd implication because largely he's been treated as someone who takes needless advantage and is a bit of a skis up to that point. But then when they get to that one, I'm like, okay, but does he live there because he's taking advantage, or does he live there because he doesn't have another place to be? Like, again, I'm not sure it crosses an uncomfortable line, but it gets close. It at least glances in the direction of it. Oh, well. This one's good. This one is altogether fun. It's just nice to have a Chibnall episode be fun. In terms of ones that he actually wrote during his era, I think this is the best one. I do. It's not the best episode of his era overall, ones that he didn't write, take that. But for stuff he wrote, this is good. This is enjoyable. This is rollicking. This is something that I watched with a smile on my face. And after the kind of faces I was making at Timeless Children and then Flux, this is just nice. Even the Daleks. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They help. But don't worry too much about it. What I really want you to remember is that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council, and I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. And now my thanks to my Patreon supporters that make this possible, including Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Oliver B., Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Melinda Walters, Jen, T. Love, Auntie Kate 808, Bernabe Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Dave Hall, Shayla Gourlay, and Rosalind Bennett. You can get I get all the names right and then I can't talk. If you want to hear me stumble over my tongue after saying your name, it's in the rewards here on the Patreon.